To find a wife, a millionaire cowboy pretended to be poor. Only the quietest woman proved her love. The horse threw him in front of everybody. One moment Cole Maddox was riding clean to the main street of Sagebrush Creek on a borrowed bay that he had specifically chosen because it looked ordinary, and the next moment the horse spooked at a dog barking from a doorway and launched him straight over his head onto the packed dirt road in front of the general store, the feed shop, and about 14 people who had nothing better to do on a Tuesday afternoon than watch a stranger eat the ground. He lay there for exactly 2 seconds, cataloging his injuries, which amounted to a bruised pride and a scraped palm, then sat up and looked around. Most people had already decided he was fine and gone back to their business. One person had not. A woman was standing outside the general store with a flour sack under one arm and looking at him with an expression that was not pity, not amusement, and not the performative concern people use when they wanted to seem helpful without getting involved. It was the plain, attentive look of someone who was simply checking whether he needed assistance and had not yet made up her mind about anything else. She said, "Can you stand?" "Yes," Cole said and stood, and his left knee disagreed with him briefly, but he did not let it show. "The dog belongs to Mr. Carver," she said. "It does that to horses regularly. He knows about it and does not care." "Good to know," Cole said, brushing dirt from his jacket. The jacket was deliberately worn. The boots were deliberately scuffed. He had spent 20 minutes that morning making sure he looked exactly like what he was pretending to be, a drifting ranch hand passing through. No money to speak of, no land, no prospect beyond the next job. It was a disguise he had worn 3 times now in 3 different towns over the past 2 months, each time without success. The women he had met had either shown no interest in a man with nothing to offer, or had shown interest that evaporated the moment they thought he was not looking. He needed someone who would look at a man with an empty pocket and a borrowed horse and see something worth knowing. His lawyer had told him he was being ridiculous. His foreman had told him he was being ridiculous. His aunt, who was the only person in his life he fully trusted, had told him it was the most sensible thing she had ever heard him say and to take his time. The woman with the flour sack had already turned back toward the store door. "I am looking for work in the area," Cole said. "Ranch work. Do you know anyone hiring?" She turned back. She had dark brown hair and a calm, open face, and she was somewhere in her mid-20s, and there was a quality about her that he noticed immediately and could not quite name, a kind of settled quietness that was not shyness and was not coldness and was not disinterest. It was more like stillness, the kind that comes from someone who thinks before they speak and means what they say when they do. "Delgado Farm, 3 miles east," she said. "They lost 2 hands last week. The work is hard and the pay is modest, but Mr. Delgado is fair." "Thank you," Cole said. "My name is Cole." "Clara Hayes," she said, and went inside. He stood on the street for a moment, the borrowed bay now tied peacefully to a post as though it had never done anything wrong in his life, and thought that the interaction had lasted 90 seconds, and he found it more interesting than anything that had happened to him in the previous 6 weeks. He went to the Delgado farm that afternoon, because 3 miles east of a town where he had nowhere else to be was a perfectly reasonable direction to walk. Mateo Delgado was a compact, serious man of about 50 who shook hands like he meant it and asked exactly 3 questions before deciding whether to hire someone. He asked what Cole had done before, whether he could drive a post without being shown twice, and whether he had any problem with getting up before the sun. Cole answered all 3 honestly, which was easier than it sounded because his actual work history, stripped of his financial results, was entirely legitimate. He had been working cattle since he was 14. He could drive a post in his sleep, and he had not slept past 4 in the morning since he was a teenager. Delgado hired him for 3 weeks with the option to extend, offered him the small bunk room off the equipment shed, and told him breakfast was at 5 sharp and that his wife made it, so he had better be there on time or not at all. Cole showed up at 4:55 the next morning. It was not Clara Hayes who made breakfast. It was a full household: Delgado, his wife Rosa, their teenage son, and Rosa's younger sister, who came in from her own place down the road to help with morning work during the busy season. Clara Hayes lived half a mile away on a parcel of land that had been her late father's and that she was running alone. She brought eggs twice a week and sometimes stayed to help with the bigger meals, and Cole found this out gradually And without asking, the way you find out things when you are paying attention to the ordinary texture of a place. He saw her the second time on the third day, when she brought a basket of eggs and stayed to help Rosa with a canning project in the kitchen. Cole was working on a fence line within sight of the house, and they exchanged a nod across the yard. It was not a charged moment. It was simply a recognition that the other person existed, which is where all things that become important begin. He saw her a third time on the sixth day, when a section of her own fence line came down in a hard wind, and she was repairing alone in the late afternoon. He stopped and helped without announcing himself, just picked up the other end of the rail and held it while she drove the nails. They worked without talking for 20 minutes, and when it was done, she said, "Thank you," and he said, "No trouble," and that was that. But on the way back to the Delgado bunk room, he was already thinking about the way she worked, efficient and unhurried, no wasted motion, no performance. She had not looked at him to see if he was noticing how capable she was. She had just been capable and let it be what it was. The moment things changed from polite distance to something else happened on a Friday evening, when Cole was sitting outside the equipment shed after supper, and Clara came to the Delgado farm to return a borrowed tool. She saw him and slowed. Then instead of continuing to the house, she stopped and sat on the fence rail a few feet away and said, "You are not a ranch hand." Cole went still. "What makes you say that?" "You hold your tools like someone who learned to use them young and spent a long time learning other things afterward," she said. "And when Rosa mentioned the farm accounts were behind, you offer to help, which is not the kind of thing a passing hand offers. It is the kind of thing someone offers when they're used to thinking about whether a business is running properly." Cole looked at her. She looked back. She was not accusing him of anything. She was just saying what she had observed. And she had observed quite a lot in 6 days. "I am not doing anything harmful," he said. "I know that," she said. "I just wanted you to know that I know. Whatever the reason is, it is your business. I am not asking." That was when he decided to tell her. Not because he had to, and not because he'd been caught, but because a particular quality she had, that unhurried attention, that willingness to state what she saw and then leave him space to respond, was exactly what he had spent 2 months looking for without knowing how to describe it. She had looked at a man with a scuffed boot and a borrowed horse and a job driving fence posts, and she had seen something worth looking at closely, and then she had handed the information back to him without attaching a demand to it. He told her the truth. Not all of it at once, but the essential shape of it, that he owned a ranch, that it was a large one, that he was 34 years old and had spent a decade building something real, and had no interest in building it, for someone who was interested in what it amounted to rather than who he actually was, that he had tried the ordinary approach, and found it produced results that depressed him, that he was sorry if it seemed like deception, and he understood if that bothered her. Clara sat on the fence rail and listened to all of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Which ranch?" she said. He told her. She nodded once, slowly, the way a person nods when something that was slightly out of focus becomes clear. "I have heard of it," she said. "My father did business with your father once, a long time ago." "I did not know that," Cole said. "No reason you would," she said. Then she said, "I am not angry about the disguise. I understand why you did it, but I want to say something to you plainly." "Go ahead," he said. "I would have been exactly who I am whether you had money or not," she said. "Not because I am particularly virtuous. Just because money is not the thing I am looking for in a person. What I am looking for is considerably harder to find and does not have a dollar value attached to it." "What are you looking for?" he said. She thought about it for a real moment. "Someone who works like it means something to them," she said. "Someone who does not need to fill every silence. Someone who helps with a fence line without being asked and does not make a point of having helped." Cole thought about this. "I did not know you were watching when I helped with the fence," he said. "I know," she said. That was rather the point. What followed was not a sudden, dramatic shift, but a careful and honest progression of days. Cole continued working at the Delgado farm because Mateo had hired him for 3 weeks, and he had given his word, and the work was real regardless of whether he needed the wages. Clara continued bringing eggs and staying for morning work, and occasionally stopping by the equipment shed in the evenings when she had a reason to be at the Delgado place, which she had more reasons than usual over the following 2 weeks. They talked the way people talk when they have both been quiet for a long time and have finally found someone worth using words with. They talked about the land, about what it meant to work something you own, about the particular loneliness of being responsible for a thing that never stops requiring you. They talked about his father, who had built the ranch and died before he could enjoy it, and her father, who had built a small farm and taught her everything about it before his heart failed at 62. They talked about what they wanted that they did not yet have. Not once during any of it did Cole make a speech or a gesture or a declaration. He simply showed up, was present, said what was true, and paid attention. And not once did Clara perform interest. She did not feel or hide interest, she did. She was exactly who she was, completely and without apology, which he found more compelling than anything performed could ever have been. On the last day of his 3-week contract, Cole told Mateo he was leaving in the morning and thanked him for the work. Mateo shook his hand and said nothing, but the handshake lasted a second longer than necessary, which for Mateo was a substantial compliment. That evening Cole went to Clara's place. It was the first time he had gone there directly rather than seeing her at the Delgado farm. Her house was small and kept with the same efficient care she brought to everything, and there was a kitchen garden that was doing extremely well, and she was sitting on the step with a cup of coffee when he came up the road. She watched him come without changing her expression. She had known he was leaving. He had told her the day before. He stopped at the gate. "I want to ask you something," he said. "All right," she said. "I own a ranch with a house large enough for a family and land that goes further than you can see on a clear day," he said. "It runs well, and it will continue to run well. None of that is what I am asking you about. What I am asking is whether you are willing to keep talking, and whether you are willing to see what this becomes if we both decide to let it. I am not asking for a decision tonight. I am not asking for anything except whether you want to continue." Clara set down her coffee cup. She looked at him for a moment with that same attentive stillness she had on the day he fell off the horse in front of the general store. "I have been wanting to continue since the fence line," she said. "I was waiting to see if you would get around to asking." Cole smiled. It was not a small smile. It was the kind that comes from somewhere real. He came back the following week, and the week after that, and by the time 3 months had passed, the people of Sagebrush Creek had formed opinions, and Mateo Delgado had said nothing to anyone except Rosa, who had already known from the second week. The longtime attorney of the Maddox Ranch, a dry man named Alistair Grove, arrived in Sagebrush Creek to review some documents, and encountered Clara Hayes over supper at the Delgado house, and told Cole afterward that she was the most sensible person he had met in 15 years of practice, which from Grove was the highest compliment he was capable of. They were married in the spring at her place, outside by the kitchen garden that was doing even better than the year before. Marco Salinas, Cole's foreman, came out from the ranch and stood beside him and made a speech that was awkward and genuine and absolutely right. Gabriel Ruiz, one of the younger hands, played the guitar with more enthusiasm and accuracy, and nobody minded at all. Clara sold her father's farm to a young family from the east who needed land and wanted a working start, and she set a fair price and sat with him for 2 full afternoons going over everything she had learned about making that particular soil produce, and left him a detailed written account of it besides, which they told her afterward was worth more than the land itself. On the night before the wedding, Cole sat on the step of the small house that was no longer going to be her house, and Clara sat beside him, and the stars over Sagebrush Creek were dense and low, and the whole night was very quiet. "I think about the horse throwing me," he said, "on the main street, in front of everyone." "So do I," she said, "occasionally. If Carver's dog had not been barking, I would have ridden past," he said. "I would never have ended up in front of the general store. I would never have seen you." Clara considered this. "You would have found another town," she said. "You would have been thrown by another horse somewhere else, probably." "Not necessarily," he said. "Possibly not," she agreed. "But here is the thing." She paused. "I was not going to say anything to you. I had decided not to. You were a stranger who had fallen in the road, and I was going to check you were standing and go inside." "What changed?" he said. "The way you stood up," she said. "You were hurt, and you did not make anything of it. You just got up and dealt with it. I thought, there is someone worth talking to." She picked up her coffee. That was all it was. A man who got up without fussing. Cole sat with that for a moment. Then he said, I spent 2 months in 3 towns looking for someone who could see past performance. And you found her by having no performance left, Clara said, because the horse took it off you before you had a chance to arrange one. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and outside the stars were very bright, and the night was warm, and everything that was going to come next was already certain, and both of them knew it, and neither of them felt the need to say so out loud, because that was exactly how the two of them were, and it was more than enough.